Transcend.
She
Did
also
you hear me?
tells
You
me
got
now,
that?
yeah. So, okay, hold on. Soul dash self-integration.
Transcend matrix.
Wait, is there a word between it though? Soul self-integration and then what?
No, it says just to transcend matrix.
Transcend. Okay.
We just try to keep it short, you know.
Transcend. All right. So it's always weird with the timing when it actually does go live, but I'll introduce you both, and I'll thank you, you know, for being with us, and then I'll say a little bit more, and then Seth is going to take it away, and we're going to have an awesome discussion.
And we got the link?
She's not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get it to you. Okay. All right. 1, 2, 3. It's going to be a little bit of a pause, as you guys know how this goes. All right.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, pretty sure, yeah, we're here. We're live with 2 really, really awesome guests today, Seth Pruzansky and I, who host this show called Conversations for a Brighter World, are joined today by Laura Matsue and Bernhard Guenther. And I am so thrilled because I have been following these guys for such a long time on social media, and they always stand out to me and catch my eye. And it's such like a high vibe of truth they bring forward. Radical self-honesty and just so much inspiration. They've had extraordinary transformation experiences, and like their whole journey is just like the story of like what it really means to be able to transform as humans. And they're very well versed in modalities and techniques that assist them in staying very strong and healthy and clear. And we're going to hear all about that. They've got very extensive, amazing bios that I'm going to put in the description that you can read about. But it's such a pleasure to be with you today. And it's so cool because I feel like I've known you for so long, but this is the first time we actually are meeting in person. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. We're super
Thank you, Laura.
excited.
Thank you, Seth. Looking forward to it.
And I know Seth is going to kind of take it away from here for a little bit.
So yes, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Bernhard and Laura Matsue, and 2 Lauras. So be careful with the names here and make sure we know who we're referring to. But yes, same thing. When Laura and I have talked about who we want to have on the show, we're looking for people that are ready to go deep, people that are survivors, people that have been through the impossible or extremely difficult things and yet somehow found their way back, and they're smiling and they're here and they're present and they're ready to take whatever life throws at them and make the best of it. And these 2, Laura Matsue and Bernhard, to me as well, like they've stood out to me. I've watched them. I've read a lot of their stuff. I've just paid attention to them, and they've always stood out as not only just authentic, but they have this drive, like a drive to continue facing any adversity, anything that's in their path. And that interests me because there's a certain spirit, there's a fire, there's a drive that wants to overcome that which we resist internally. And it seems to me like those are the people that really have the breakthroughs and that are able to heal and help usher in new modalities or new ways of thinking, feeling, perceiving that can help others. And that's what these 2 guys represent to me. So the idea of the 4 of us having a conversation who all have, you know, probably similar backgrounds with overcoming terrible things and then getting to a point where you're like, oh my God, I love life. It's teaching me how to become the soul I truly am. You know, when you finally get to that level, you guys are like that. So with that, I'll put out a question. With everything that's going on in the world right now, as crazy as it all appears to be based on what we think is happening, how can somebody who feels stuck or feels like they're hopeless to the degree that it's eroding their health? Because a lot of people will look at the external stuff and they'll internalize it. They'll be like, oh my God, that's happening. It's this happening. And they internalize it and they become sick emotionally, mentally, whatever. They get knocked off balance. Being through what you guys went through and to where you are now, what advice would you have for people who are going through this and want to be the best version or the healthiest version or the most balanced version of themselves? How would they do that? If there's a way to, I know it's a big question, but if there's a way to condense that.
Well, the meaning of life is.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Thank you, Seth, so much. Thank you for that. We're still, in the process ourselves. It keeps going, as you guys know. But I think for many of us, it seems like in my life, and I'm sure Laura as well, there's always, like, as I like to reference Neo from the Medics, the splint in the mind. There's something, you're always questioning. There's something off, and there's an inner drive, this inner light. And I feel when you say it, if it comes to advice, I think I had to be unapologetically myself. It comes down to authenticity, especially in this day, on a very basic level, authenticity. Because I see a lot of people suffer because they present themselves in a certain way externally to the public, but internally they feel very differently. They try to adjust, And I always go back to when I started my journey, my own disillusionment and depression, despair. I came across a book by Krishnamurti, Freedom from the Known. And this one quote always stuck out to me. And he said, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And that's what people try to do. We try to adjust to a society, but pathology has become normalized. And when you do that, you get sick, even sicker, So what I see, all your depressions, all the stuff that's coming up, in a sense, I see it as a healthy reaction of your spiritual immune system, not to adjust to a pathological society. So going back, like how that being authentic yourselves, that entails in the question, which I asked in my path, and I know Laura as well, who am I? That's the ultimate question. And that sets the, puts you on the quest, on the path. And I also know once you sincerely ask the question, sincerely go there, so to speak, there will be help. I'm sure you guys experience that. There's divine help forces. There are doors open that haven't been doors before. There's magic. There's actually good in the world as well. But it depends on our commitment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's also, you have to have that drive within you to sincerely desire to know God and connect to God within yourself. And for many people, it actually takes being pushed to a really dark place to have that sincere call, because we get so comfortable in our lives and even everything going on in the world, like we talk about all the time. In a way, it can be used as a blessing because it pushes people out of their comfort zone, like you can no longer run away from your trauma or your isolation or however this is showing up for you. And I know a lot of people are dealing with that right now, and they don't have the tools to help them get through difficult times, because we do in the Western world live in a very comfortable reality for the most part compared to like third world countries. So I think that that's a necessary friction. I know for me, it took literally being put into life or death situations before I really sincerely made that shift, and there's one thing to like work on yourself because you think it's going to get you a better relationship or healthier or whatever, you think you're going to get something out of it. But it's another thing to do that because you have the sincere desire to know who you truly are, and that connection to that part of yourself that doesn't die will get you through these crazy times. Because if you remain connected to that, like you see the whole media, it's all about fear of death and pushing fear of death with people. But if you can contact that part of yourself that's your true self, which takes intentional psycho-spiritual work to get rid of everything in the way, then you can survive these times and actually thrive. Like what you kind of named is what we call like this kind of anti-fragility, which develops out of being pushed to crisis, to death, health crises, all these sorts of different things that show up in our lives that we think catch us out of nowhere. They can be huge blessings as well, because it gets us in touch with who we truly are. So I know that's kind of a generalized statement, but it is really important to have that sincerity, because even with people we do work with, if you don't have that sincerity, you'll go back to the life that you have after you finish the retreat, after you finish the course. It has to be really within you at all times, basically.
Wow. Did you guys feel derailed at all with just how everything kind of began to unroll in a really extreme way last year? I mean, how did you kind of like manage it? Because I know you guys go real deep. I mean, a lot of the articles you've written and a lot of the information you put out really understands what's going on behind the scenes, like in ways that many don't, who might even have a shred of a clue. So you guys have known about these agendas for a long time and been expressing about it. But yeah, so what was it kind of like to see it though? It's like been mourning about it and then here it is. And did you feel derailed, and how did you kind of bounce back or find a way to perceive this reality in a way that, you know, serves you? And I know you just really explained that so beautifully on a personal level, but on a global level, how would you?
Yeah. That's a good question, Laura. It's interesting because, right, I know you as well. I've been aware of all this research since the 90s, being aware of the agenda to render down America into the third world socialist country, you know, the New World Order and all of this, it was all there. But I didn't expect it the way it went down. You know what I mean? I'm not into predictions anyway. So it derailed us in a way of like, oh, this is getting pretty fast in the way they pulled it off and whatnot. But in retrospect, and now everything is like, of course it's happening this way. It couldn't be any other way. So everything makes sense. It's a lot of confirmation of my writings and the work I've already put out there, you know. And now more and more people, like Laura mentioned, it's like on the silver lining is more and more people are getting, quote, red pilled or waking up, you know, who were laughing at us or not taking us seriously and all of that. It's kind of hip to be a conspiracy theorist right now in this day, I think. I mean, that's a whole topic on its own because we know there's a lot of disinformation within that as well. But, you know, it really forced us to up our game on a spiritual, emotional level, but also considering some physical preparation, not getting into like necessarily full on survival mode.
Although
and
we did stock up at some point.
Because we were living in LA, you know, so, and we all had to drive to basically get away from LA for a while. And then that kind of was the trigger, like we need to get out of here. And that was one of the best decisions we've done because nowadays, as you can see, location also matters to a certain degree.
Yeah. And it was intense when we were in LA because we were literally leaving LA when they had the protests going on, like the BLM protests, and we had to drive around them because the streets were closed down. And then they were also like, for me, like my own trauma, I had to revisit my own trauma and have to kind of re-implement tools on another level because like these riots were going on. They were talking about defunding the police and like it brought up like core needs of safety, you know? So for us, it was like finding a place where we felt more aligned to as well. And I think that, you know, we even talked about the other day, if we were still in LA right now, like I don't think it would have been good for us because of the amount that we do speak out, you know, and the cancel culture going on and whatnot. So but in Sedona, it's a much different energy. It's very fascinating to see how state by state, it's an entirely different experience as well.
Yeah. And also the splitting, I mean, that's what I've been talking about. I wrote an essay about this, the timeline reality split, which I hypothesized 5-6 years ago. And that's what we see happening right now. There's a splitting happening within humanity, right? Yeah. Based on soul level, soul potential. So there's on some level, there's the artificial divide and conquer agenda by the matrix forces, right? Trying to pit us against each other based on just distortions of race, social status, and all this nonsense. But there's a splitting happening. I feel there's something in light of the evolution of consciousness naturally happening based on level of soul embodiment, the work we've already done and whatnot. Because I think the biggest illusion people have is that we believe just that we all, you know, we all one, yes, from this higher perspective, but we're not all the same. Yes. And I don't mean to get into like, you know, then you get being spiritually incorrect, right? Or being judgmental, but you have to consider that there are other forces that take all the other people, and mechanical blind people, as we see, are actually becoming more dangerous than the psychopaths themselves because they carry out the agenda. So that's why, as Laura said, it's also, I feel, very important in this day and age who we surround ourselves with discernment.
Yes.
Just to jump in, just to to develop kind of like the initial question, and just so much of like the level of wisdom that you guys function at when we look at like the darkness and emotions like fear or reactions like fear. Where do we draw the line between like a reaction of fear and just caution and discernment, right? So it's like, oh, don't hang around with your friends and family because they got the you know what, and now they're dangerous to be around, and vice versa, and how this conquer and divide is pushing us into, are we reacting from fear, discernment, or caution? And how do we know which is which, or how do you guys?
Well, we definitely talk about that when we talk about trauma and a lot of our group work, is because you know, there's a thing called neuroception, which is your nervous system's ability to detect danger or safety in their environment. And as long as you're holding unresolved trauma, you may have faulty neuroception, meaning you see safe situations as dangerous and dangerous situations as safe. So I think the trauma piece is really huge, so that our instinctual survival mechanism is actually operating in the way it should, you know? So for a lot of people, they actually see, because they've been living in fear all year, I think that they actually see dangerous situations as safe, and they have that faulty neuroception going on, because fear actually, you're right, has an intelligence to it. It's meant to detect danger or safety in our environment. For the most part, you know, even walking around, we live in a very touristy town, you see people who are just wired for fear all the time, you know, like they're an animal who's afraid. So they don't even know that the fear is not working in an intelligent way because it's on all the time. So I think finding tools and resources that can like up-regulate, down-regulate your nervous system, to also use that objective observer to like look at yourself and observe what's going on, that metacognition, and being like, do I need to be afraid in my home right now? You know, like, because that's how it's functioning for people, is they're wired for fear all the time. But fear is also a healthy instinctual response. Like we actually, I think, felt a healthy amount of fear when we needed to leave LA. And it turns out it was like the perfect time, because then all the moving vans were like booked out, you know, so that it does serve a purpose. You're right. And I think instinctually we have this kind of healthy amount of fear running through humanity right now, because there is danger, there is potential that it could go a different direction, and it's up to our consciousness, the choices that we make, which direction that goes in.
Yeah. No, it's a very good question, Laura. And I feel like to really tap into this true sense of like what I need to do, our internal guidance system, which we need to connect to, this the importance of staying embodiment, which is also what Laura and I's work is all about. Because we can so much get caught up in the mental realm and overanalyze and analysis paralysis and even paranoia, you know, too much, which doesn't help, which you see also in the quote unquote conspiracy truth movement, that, you know, and all of that. So it's about staying grounded in 0 point, non-reactive, and really making the decision more from the gut rather than from your thought process. And that's what we really, you know, have made our decisions so far. It's really like an internal embodied knowing. And I'm sure you can relate to that. But tuning into that is easier said than done, because as Laura said, a lot of people have trauma and childhood wounding and all kinds of stuff armored around them they're not even aware of. And that's being triggered right now. That's coming up to the surface. Right?
Yes.
So how do you guys do it then? Because I absolutely agree. Trauma is like, not only trauma, but the stress that is the result of trauma and ancestral war, and just everything that's happened that's led us to where we are. Yeah. There's a disproportionate amount of human beings that are more prone to perceive reality in a fear-based state than there are humans who are able to perceive it from a wider perspective, a more open, seeing through it as, you know, they get stuck in it. So what would you say are the main things that you've been aware of that help somebody move out of that trauma state where they're just like, oh my God, they're perceiving everything, and into a more relaxed, embodied place where they're not so attached to what they think is happening, because they're feeling the energy fields of their body, and they recognize that that is much better feeling and more healthy for their overall well-being than always focusing on fear. How do you get people out of trauma and into a more calm state?
Yeah, well, it depends on the person and like where they're stuck, right? So usually with trauma, like a part of you fragments into literally kind of like outside of your body. And there also needs to be a completion process that needs to happen with that part of yourself. So maybe the inner child needs to be retrieved and you need to cry. Maybe there's a part of yourself that's gone into a freeze state, a protector part that needs to be integrated, that needs to learn how to fight back and get angry. So it's really up to each individual, you know, but on a basic level, you know, toning the vagus nerve. There's little exercises that you can do. You know, one's called the Basic Exercise by Stanley Rosenberg. That's really good for just activating the parasympathetic nervous system right away. Anyone can look it up. And then also having a consistent mind-body practice of some sort, whether it's yoga, qigong, anything that really moves the energy in your body. Because that's one thing I see with a lot of people is they have literally a backlog of trauma stored in their body that they have not processed. And, you know, it just needs to be processed to completion. There's something, even every single physical illness, I think, first starts off as like stuck emotion. And so if you just learn how to process that every single day and taking a little time to feel in your emotions and let go of them, you know, you can start to release some of that backlog. Because that's what I see, especially when people get triggered. Like when people get triggered, what gets triggered within them is actually all this ammunition of unprocessed emotions that they're carrying, right? And it actually has an intelligence to it getting triggered because it needed to come out, right? But then it's what we do with it. If we start blaming it on some politician or what's going on in the world, you know, that disempowers us, whereas we can use it for self-knowledge. So I think it's also really great to even like him and I, like we are constantly working like psychologically on each other and like asking each other, okay, like you're triggered there. What are you actually feeling? We trigger each other,
yeah. So.
Yeah, we trigger each other and we do work. Be like, what are you actually feeling? You know, we really bring it away from the story and the externalization and bring it back into the body. And getting into that practice with ourselves is so important because the triggers have so much intelligence to them. Like they're literally just gateways to our past experiences where we haven't processed something in the past. However, what you see happening now is like everyone is just triggered and projecting on each other left and right, you know, and nothing ever gets resolved.
Yeah. I think also there's a good question, Seth. The prerequisite to really, before we can really work on our traumas, the prerequisite in any self-work basically, which is being able to observe yourself. Right, having this almost this witness, which is easier said than done because we're very reactive, mechanically, easily identified with our emotions and actions, and just do without ever reflecting, right? So it's about like having this curiosity to yourself. Oh, I'm triggered. I'm very emotionally upset. What this person irritates me. What this person said. So normally we then externalize and blame instead of like, okay, what is within me? What does this person remind me of? What's going on really? And then you realize, as Laura said before, that a lot of our intense emotional reaction triggers we have has nothing to do whatsoever with the present situation, but something from the past got activated, a trauma that is stuck in the body. So the self-observation is key.
Yes, gosh, and it can be like fun. It's like archaeology, you know. Stuff and the most wonderful treasures end up, you know, coming forward, and that's how I feel we move into higher earth energies, because we're unlocking so much, and we're claiming so much more of ourselves that we've given away as far as giving our power away. Do you guys feel a little like thrown? Well, I know I said derailed earlier, because it's been derailing for everybody, including those that are really solid. So I mean, but you took action. And really never got derailed. It was more like it was a rerouting.
No, I like, especially when the riots were going on, that was really scary, you know, because the riots were going on. They were also talking about defunding the police at the same time, you know, and we lived out in the middle of nowhere, and like we're speaking truth online. So who's to say someone's going to knock on our door, and you know, so there is definitely a reigniting of like just also really understanding my own trauma survival responses, because I've been put in actual dangerous situations before in my life that I had to get out of, you know. And in this case, I think there was a healthy amount of fear where I was like, okay, we can't live in this city anymore, you know. And then it was also another layer of stuff that had to come up, like my own conditioning. I grew up in an extremely liberal leftist family, you know, and my views are actually more quote unquote traditionally liberal still. Like I believe in freedom of speech, you know, freedom of the individual. And I had to also work through another layer of deconditioning this year as well, speaking out and speaking about my experience and about how the divide and conquer shows up in the race wars and against critical race theory. So I had to really, you know, it never stops. Like, you know, like each time kind of an emotional explosion would come up in regards to last year, it was another layer of myself that I had to unpack and do. And I took it as an opportunity, you know, because it's easy to say, okay, we need to just become individuals and decondition ourselves from society. But to actually face that does leave you kind of groundless, because you don't know who you are. Like people find a lot of comfort and security believing what the status quo believes. So to ask that question, it puts you in a tremendous point of vulnerability, you know? Yeah. So last year was like that whole process for me, and never mind, like, I mean, I'm sure you get it too, Laura, but like the amount of like trolls and attacks and like cancellations that happened, you know, like I'm human, I get affected by that, you know, lots of old friends, even family, like were like calling me all sorts of nasty names. And I had to sit with that in meditation every single night. So in a way, it actually made me stronger, because it's like, now that, you know, like all of the worst possible things that my friends could have said to me, old friends from like my old life before I went through my own awakening process, but like, you can't scare me anymore. It's like, I've lost everything now that they all think I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist, right? And then I get the freedom to be myself now. That's the gift out of it, you know? So
this is what's so incredible about talking to you guys, because of how you leverage adversity, how you are such alchemists and transmuters, and so spiritually mature. And I mean, this is like a level of self-mastery that, I mean, is a daily practice, right? But are you shocked at seeing so many people that instead of processing the fear, people that you didn't expect, maybe they're energy workers or call themselves, like women's leaders, or just some of the more sort of new agers, which you guys have, called out in a really amazing way over the years. Just a lot of the false lights and the facades that people carry. They don't do the real work, but instead of being fear-based, they're almost like too light and love. And then, they're posting about having erotic experiences getting the jab. It's just like,
it's very disturbing. Yeah, well, that's like, I actually went through my own spiritual bypassing phase for a long time, to the point where like, and especially in our relationship, like it's very hard to spiritually bypass because we have such an emotionally connected relationship. And I also have compassion for them because, it's easier to quote unquote spiritual bypass than to actually deal with the issues. It's a trauma response. It's a form of disassociation, Yeah. But it's also related to what you wrote the other day, evolutionary astrology, the consensus.
That's what I mean. Like we are just on different level of beings. I think everybody's with what's happening right now, as I call the time of transition, and the intensity, this end game accelerating, right? The dark really trying to climb down. But it really exposes everything. It separates the wheat from the chaff. And I'm not trying to put myself into any group, whatever, but it really shows where people are at, regardless of what their image, their teachings, their popularity, the books they've written, how many follow. It doesn't, excuse me, fucking matter at all, right? Now it shows you your level of embodiment, soul embodiment, and not just intellectual knowledge, but how you apply it, how you reply to this. So that's really like, it's a litmus test. That's the way I see it. And it's without judgment, but there are different levels of being, right? And we have seen this with the internet, many people talking about false light. Nowadays, if you have some basic intellectual capabilities, you can regurgitate everything and create a crafty image and appear a certain way, right? But when the shit's hit the fan right now, then the truth will reveal itself, and it is revealing itself in the way we maybe not expect, but by making the darkness conscious, right? By showing parts of others we didn't expect. And certain individuals have also surprised me, others not at all. I was like, okay, here we go. I've seen it all along in a sense, so there's that. And I mean, going back to the derailing, what Laura mentioned on you, Laura, can relate to that as well. What's been a doozy last year was not just from the mainstream what's happening, but also within the so-called conspiracy truth movement. There have been always inside attacks and slander and backstabbing and all of that. You know what I mean? Especially with, the famous 17th letter of the alphabet last year, I gave it some credibility because, that's fascinating. And boom, I got like attacked from people, like massive attacks and backstabbing and slander and all of that. And it's created such a division and friction. So that on a psychic level, it really got to me, as Laura explored as well, talked about before. So boundaries were very necessary in this whole phase as well.
Yeah. Boundaries, like even for me, like I turn off my Instagram comments, like, and like, I just want to be able to do my work sincerely and honestly, and so taking on all the extra psychic energy, sometimes it's not worth it, and that's really key. Him and I both have water moons. We have both Cancer moons. So we're very sensitive, like homey people. And we feel this, like, it's like when people like attack us online or slander us or whatever, I feel that. And it's not that I feel it, they take it personally, but I feel their pain, so then I have to sit with that and come from a place of non-reaction. And I think that's how we do transmute energies. The moment that someone attacks us, and we don't attack them back and project that back on them, and we just sit with it and process it and be with the pain that they don't want to feel, and that's how we can transmute energy. It doesn't mean we don't make boundaries with that person, but it means that we're not reacting, we're not repeating that cycle ourselves and contributing to it.
Amazing. So Seth and all three of you, and then I'll, I want to make sure that you ask questions too, because I just asked like two, but I have to ask the three of you though. I know like everybody's gone through a lot of dark night of the souls. There might've been addiction in the past. And some of these things would be defaults in the times of maybe stress or triggers or just wanting to escape the madness that one would grab a vice that isn't very healthy. How do you feel currently when there is a trigger? Do you feel completely clear of all that? Do you still struggle with it? Do you find yourself plunging into some of those old spaces that you have gotten yourself out of before, almost like, oh my gosh, here I go again, I'm going into another dark night of the soul? Or do you feel like you're pretty much out of that zone? And if that's too personal, don't worry about answering, but anybody start if that's an
okay. Like I think that I'm pretty much out of the worst. Like I was extremely suicidal from my teens until my Saturn return at 28, 29, when I actually was going to kill myself, and then through some divine grace I got an intervention. So I think I'm like, honestly, the worst things that have happened to me have not happened the past year. They happened way before this year. So I'm a very Plutonian person. I had Pluto on my sun. So I've been through some crazy shit.
No, I have. Yeah.
Oh, you do too. Yeah. So you know what it's like. So eventually when you have that placement, you have to consciously engage with your own evolution, because you realize if you ignore the calls of the deep self, it turns up as a backlog and an explosion happens in your face. So I listen to those little calls and voices. And to be honest, like maybe it's my astrological setup, but working through the parental stuff, like those are our biggest triggers with our family of origin in this lifetime. So it always goes back to one of them, and the more that you work on your relationship with them, not necessarily actually having a one-on-one relationship, but the feelings and emotions that you didn't process as childhood, the less triggerable you become. Like, as the new age people never want to go to childhood because that's like basic psychology, but that's usually where it leads, and we're also lucky we have each other. We got a dog, I feel super blessed at this point in time that we have each other to support each other. That's been a huge blessing, so it never gets as bad as it's been, and not only that, we have responsibilities. Like we have responsibilities to our community that we work with, people we're group coaching with, so taking care of my holistic health is part of my job. I can't allow myself to get into those kinds of places because I have work to do. And I think it's the same for you too.
Yeah, I mean, we also
like divine parents for humanity. Sorry, go ahead, Bernhard.
No, totally. I mean, like also the way, I've always, I always share my process in my writings, and we also don't try to appear as like, oh, we are the awakened light and twin flame. Nonsense,
Yeah.
I work through my own shit on a daily basis. Still, I listen to Laura. I've got to work through the worst, but the work becomes more refined. I always say I don't call myself awake in the true meaning of the work, in the word of being enlightened, just completely embodied of the, true self. My shadow still comes up, right? I get triggered. I sometimes, sometimes like you said, Laura, like sometimes, oh, fuck, I'm down here again. And then I have to watch out my super ego so it doesn't judge, so I don't judge myself like, fuck, you should have known better.
Yes.
So I sometimes, it's the way it's two steps forward, one step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's a continuing process. I have my up days, my down days, and it's a continuing work, but I have more, more tools to work with it, And I want to realize with healing, it's not necessarily that everything has gone away. It's just I have better resource material, more response ability to respond in a more conscious way rather than in a trigger mechanical way.
Yeah, because I don't think the point is to reduce the triggers, but just to reduce like their emotional wallop that they have. You still get frustrated if like someone tells me, why aren't you wearing a mask or something when I go out to the grocery store. I'm going to be a little bit annoyed, but I'm not going to let that emotion control me, So I think with time and practice, you just reduce the, Gabor Mate calls it the ammunition behind the trigger, so you can still get triggered and annoyed or whatever, but it's not going to make you explode to the point where you create this whole situation.
Yeah.
So I think we're never going to be like untriggerable until we're enlightened, but that's not the point. It's just that we're not acting that out as much.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
That refractory period, that's what you're talking about. A lot of people get stuck in the feeling of anxiety or stress or tension or whatever, and they stay in it.
Yes.
And they think it's normal because so many people do that. But now we're realizing like, okay, feel it, but don't stay dwelling in it.
Yes.
Move beyond it. And that's what causes the ability to bounce back quicker, is what it seems like.
Yes. Exactly.
Right? We're creatures of habit. Like we are creatures of habit. And when you look at that and you look at how most of what we think is going on, was including the language that we're speaking, was never really ours to begin with, but that we've created an entire identity from all this information that was kind of like given to us, and we think it's who we are. And then we start coming to terms with, wait a minute, I'm addicted to believing certain projections or emotional reactions, believing that's who I am, and it's not. And so as you start realizing that, it's like, okay, wow, I've become addicted to, it's more like dark night of the ego, right? It's, instead of dark night of the soul, it's like the soul wants to come through, but the ego keeps these addictive tendencies going on. And so we realize that we're like, oh my God, I've become addicted to all this past heavy shit, and I keep revisiting it and dwelling in it, and it brings me down. So I want to do drugs, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. But no, actually, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going, because I'm a creature of habit, the logical thing is like, okay, let's create new habits that, like you guys were saying before, yoga, opening your awareness, instead of saying this focused thing of, oh, this is me, this is the world. Open up, look where we are. We're surrounded by infinity. The more we practice this and make a habit out of it, the more we move out of these old programs that we get hung up on that actually kind of weren't really ours to begin with. And again, I think that's what separates the wheat from the chaff, like you were saying, Bernhard, is the people who are like, you know what? I am going to create a healthy way of being that overrides all of this unhealthy imprinting that I've unknowingly or unconsciously allowed to determine my own state of being. And it seems like that's what we're all doing in different ways, right?
Yeah, and it does help that we had these kinds of practices in place before this happened, you know, and for some people, they're just kind of waking up now and they're like, okay, I got to start meditating, got to start doing yoga. And, you know, it does take a certain amount of discipline and will in the beginning to get the ball rolling. But now it's like, I automatically, every night I sit in front of my altar to meditate. I don't have to like force it. It's sometimes uncomfortable still, obviously, but I don't have to force myself to do it, because it's like you literally just have to train your brain to make a habit out of something, and that does take will in the beginning, you know, because we're breaking the routine. So it is a rewiring that needs to happen, you know. And in the beginning especially, there's this thing by this meditation teacher called Kuladasa where he talks about the 10 stages of meditation. I think it's a famous Zen drawing about the amount of effort you have to put in meditation to tame the monkey mind. And it's a lot of effort at the beginning, you know. You do have to exert that effort and will. That's why that sincerity to be like, I know that there's a better way, because the ego is usually stronger than the soul for most people. But then as you do these kinds of practices, the soul grows stronger. And yeah, the ego is still there, but the soul is more in the front.
Yeah, Seth, what you said just reminded us, want to jump in, because the ego is a trickster, you know. It's a very big trickster and can hijack all kinds of things, you know. You can easily develop the spiritual ego, you know what I mean, like falling into all the traps. But I also like what you mentioned with addiction. I've seen a lot of people, and even myself, when I'm observant, how we can be unconsciously addicted to suffering.
Yes.
Over and over, addicted to our trauma, to our story, to identify with it, because who are we if you know, because it's such a temptation to identify as the victim, right? And to blame and just be in that story all along, right? But then, you know, you don't heal, you will never transcend it, so to speak. And, you know, on that note, what besides the necessary like deeper inner work and a basic psychological work, trauma work, shadow work, and all of that, childhood wounding, would also have what I feel is necessary to match it with spiritual work in terms of aspiration to the divine, to God, or whatever you may want to name, this higher part of ourselves, the true self. And that has helped me a lot. I work a lot of prayer as well when I'm down in the pit, when something drags me down. I think psychological work alone, you can easily end up digging in the mud, and there's always more. You need to match up, anchor the light.
Yes.
Or if you just go the spiritual path, then we know spiritual bypassing, and people overestimate themselves. Oh, I'm already in 5D and blah, 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 right? So, or 12D and whatnot. So both needs to be matched together, and we need to clear the vessel to anchor the light. That's what we're in right now.
Yes.
So would you say then, like you guys said, like in the beginning, it takes that tenacity and that willpower and that discipline to start forming new habits or new neural networks that represent your commitment to forming new habits. Would you say then that at some point, and I'll just speak for me, because for a long time I would try to do so much and it seemed like I wasn't getting anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I just kept working on it and working on it. And I'd listen to different people and I'd do different things and everyone's like, feel the trauma, feel the pain, feel it, just do it. And it just kept creating more of it, you know? And
yes.
I was in prison. I spent 3 years in prison. I was a severe heroin addict, just all kinds of problems, like extreme dysfunction. And I was so traumatized both by things that I did and things that just happened as a result of the stupid decisions that I made. And when I would focus on the pain and trauma and all that, and it wouldn't go away. But at some point, I was like, what if I just love this energy inside of me? Because you said it, like, observing the observer. A lot of people in theory get what that is, but maybe let's break that down a little bit more. And I'll just say this and tell me if you agree with it. Observing the observer, what is that? It's like, okay, there's some kind of energy that is causing all these functions to happen in our body faster than the speed of light. It's causing the heart to beat, causes thoughts to arise in our mind, causes all this stuff. And it is profoundly intelligent. It's way more intelligent than I am. So when I take my awareness that's stuck and in victim mode and looping and projecting, and I start focusing on that field that's in me and breathing with it, then all of a sudden, and I turn on the ability to love it. Like, because it's like, oh my God, this is a miracle. Like, what is it? What's causing this? And when I do that, something happens where this release just happens. The heart opens, all the other glands in the body begin to open up, and they release feel-good chemicals that override the stress response. And they tune you into a greater expression of what you actually are. And then observing things from that level, suddenly it doesn't look as serious as everybody keeps projecting it to be, because they're addicted to their stress response of what they think it is. Would you, I know I kind of went off.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit, because especially when you're doing, somatic meditation, which is just basically just putting your awareness on your body and processing your emotions. Some people do it with the approach of trying to change it, and that actually puts more tension and more pain on top of it. So it's all about the mindset. Whereas if you do it with a sense of loving presence, then automatically the tension tends to release. So, and a lot of people actually get into spiritual self-work because they just hate themselves and they want to be a better person and they're not okay the way they are. So right away, the mindset from the beginning is actually making problems worse for them, and it can actually make things worse. So you have to do it from that place of compassion, from that place of just loving, connected presence, like not trying to change it, but just observing it the way it is.
Yeah. Now, what you said, Seth, also reminds me, like, I'm a professional body worker. That's been my living for the past 20 years, doing just deep body work, energy work, rolfing, deep tissue, all kinds of stuff. And what I've known, that the body has its own intelligence, and that's when you're tapping. The body truly can heal itself.
Yes.
And it's not about, using willpower to a degree to get in a certain, but you cannot will yourself to heal. That's almost a paradox, right? So we all want to be healed yesterday, right? But the psyche has its own healing timetable, including the body and whatnot. You see, even we have some two amazing astrologers here, by the way. Even in astrology, you see the cycles, right? It has its own, there's an own,
rhythm
to it that we have no control over. The ego doesn't like to hear that, but we are beyond that, right?
Yes.
Control. So I know when I tune into my body, like similar when I, even when I've worked on clients, I'm not like, the healer is not healing anything. A true healer is tapping into the, energy field or the body and whatnot, and responds to that consciousness, to that intelligence, to help the person heal him or herself. That's really all it is. right? The moment you take ownership, oh, I heal, then the ego hijacks it already.
Yeah.
So I know for myself, even somatic meditations, observing, it's not like Laura said, I'm not trying to change anything, just putting the awareness already on it without trying to change anything, without labeling it. That's also tricky, the mind right away, or what is this, not trying to attach any story, and just allowing yourself to this awareness, to the awareness alone change it already. You know what I mean? That's like basic quantum physics. Even they say the moment you look at something, it changes. So it's kind of that principle. And then you see that the body has its own intelligence and just allowing, and that's easier said than done, because we have all these unconscious holding mechanisms, beliefs and whatnot, but it's more tuning into that. And I think that's what you mentioned also with giving love to it. Love is like this full acceptance, right? That's what it truly is. That's what love is, unconditionally.
Oh my gosh. I love this conversation. So, I mean, you're no stranger to understanding these agendas. In fact, you're very pioneering in, sharing this information very much long ago, and early stages of all this. And I know there was some connection with Lisa Renee, and that caught my eye, this one article about ETs and aliens. And so say somebody makes a choice that wasn't a very conscious choice before it's really created the detriment that some of these things are capable of creating, and they start to really get morphed into the AI and transhumanism. Do you feel there's a way to bring them back? Do you feel that if their intent is good and they're willing to sort of correct or align, do you feel like, how some are saying, there's no turning it around, there's nothing you can do at this point? And this, because it almost feels like, even, and we were talking about disinfo too, that's a form of mind control. If we truly believe that, we're feeding that. Do you feel like we have the power to transmute the scary stuff that we're seeing, that we might, be concerned is irreversible, to the point where, yes, there is a shift, but what about people who still love each other, that don't, it's like, okay, you made that choice, but there's no hatred or toxicity between us. There's still love and respect. Are we waving them goodbye as they get pulled into this thing, or how do you process that?
Well, what you mentioned, Laura, is very important, because I can see, and I even can see to myself sometimes, of being aware of the agenda. There's a difference between like just being aware of the agenda of what they intend, as opposed to feeding this doom and gloom energy and scenario, right? And just because they want to create that reality through us anyway, by tagging into it. And I unfortunately see a lot of people in the called truth movement, whatever that is at this point, I don't know. I'm just like, falling into the doom and gloom, right? And all of this. And I can sometimes myself maybe falling into it, but I really want to make clear that, when I point things to it, now this is their agenda. What, even transhumanism and AI, and it can look very dark and bleak, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be able to reach the goal, right? And I feel as much dark as there is, there's always, the light is increasing more and more. And I feel more and more people are waking up, right? But because of, the way the media is controlled and all of it, even social media, big tech, mainstream media, it looks very bleak, but there's maybe even the majority, in the silent majority, so to speak, right? Which were being censored on all levels. So I feel it's not that bleak. It's just really depends on each one of us. And going also regarding your question about others, I think there are difference of level of being, and some people maybe beyond the point of no return. But it really comes down to, what do we really know about other person's deeper soul lessons, karmic and otherwise soul evolution and all of that, when I'm still trying to figure out my own, by the way, So anything could change, absolutely. Sometimes, I get also my, cynical, like jaded, whatever, like we're lost, like screw everybody else. Laura, she made this great meme a couple of weeks ago, these two sides, like one side of me, like, fuck this, I'm done with this prison planet, family of light, let's unite and get out of this planet, right? This is one part of myself. And the other part is like, everything is going as it's supposed to be in light of the evolution of consciousness, right? So, because that's the truth from a higher perspective. We don't have the ability to see with the eyes of the divine. So what we need to go through on various ways, who knows, for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
But I feel, it also comes down to the divine grace, I think, theoretically speaking, anybody can wake up at any time.
Yes.
Who knows? It's not up to us.
That's one thing that's given me faith is like, there's something that Edgar Cayce called about the law of grace, which can actually supersede the law of karma. So I'm sure you've experienced in your own life with your journey sounds similar to mine, Seth, but I also had divine grace that literally just, it felt like I was forgiven for everything bad that it was ever wrong with me. Like that's the presence. And it really does transmute a lot of karma. And I think that's what humanity is really riding on right now, because there is an AI transhumanist agenda. There is a deep and profound psycho-spiritual awakening happening, these two main timelines, right? And I do think there is going to be, I don't know, I never know when divine grace is going to happen, but I'm hoping that there is going to be some sort of divine grace. And that's what I have faith in. And as far as the division with friends and family, you know, like that's, I mean, it's like the Jesus lesson. Like we have to learn how to love thy neighbor, even if they're like vaccinated and telling us to get vaccinated or whatever. This is where the rubber hits the road, right? And a lot of the friends I've lost during these times were more people that I was already losing out of my life already. So they were just kind of on the edge, you know, they already couldn't relate to me the moment I started committing to the spiritual path. They kind of just thought I was some weird spiritual weirdo. But now I've become some dangerous conspiracy theorist to them, you know? And at the same time, I do have compassion because they're in this, what they call in evolutionary astrology, this consensus state where their beliefs about themselves and the world are a reflection of the status quo. So they don't individuate, they don't think for themselves. But I'm not going to hate them, you know, even if they hate me. They may not want to be friends with me anymore because it's too triggering for them. But at the same time, I think that's really important to just, you know, to bring it down to that basic love and compassion. Even if someone like literally hates you because you don't want to get vaccinated or something, you know, and not projecting that which we're getting from them. And even when I see people outside now, because the mask mandate has lifted in Arizona, I'm like, they're wearing masks outside alone still. I'm like, what are you doing? A part of me is like that. But then the other part is like, okay, you know, but when I was not wearing a mask, I was triggering them. So I can see how these kind of karmic cycles of like are just being back and forth between these two crowds, right? And I'm just trying to notice myself when I try and do the same thing what they were doing to me, because I think that's how we really transmute karma, is by not repeating the cycle.
I mean, it comes down to the law of free will, respecting free will.
Yes.
You cannot, you know, even respecting their free will, if it's their even manipulated free will to go along with the agenda, there's nothing we can do. You know that you cannot wake anybody up by force, as much as we like to somebody, you know, because we look at our own journey, nobody has woken, quote unquote, us up by force, right? Like shoved information down the throat and whatnot. No, it came from our inner call. What we can do, and what we all think doing in our own ways, is spread what I call seeds of awareness.
Yeah.
And never underestimate the butterfly effect, right? I still get sometimes emails from people from years ago, almost a decade. You know what you wrote? Actually, you know, I was all attacking you and personally and all of this, but you know what? You were right. And it's not about it's not for my ego. What I'm saying is just the information we put out, you know, can help others, but we cannot make other people see. Do the information, whatever you may do. And that's how we use social media, or my website, or you guys as outlets. That's the best we can do, right?
Yes.
To spread seeds of awareness.
You
some
guys,
may sprout, some may not.
you guys are the best posts. I just absolutely love everything that you write. And it's so, it's just such a mix of so much, kind of what I described in the beginning. And we'll talk about, before we go, just the kind of work you're doing and where to find you and this and that. But Seth, do you have any questions? Because I did have a really important thing to say, but I'm going to sit on it for just a second. But Seth, you want
me to open up something?
Yeah, no, something was coming through, but I want to just give it a minute or two. So go ahead.
Okay. All right. So based on everything that we have talked about and shared and exchanged, it seems like we, as this species that we temporarily are in these bodies, are going through a massive evolutionary impulse or an evolutionary process. And to the degree that we as individuals pay attention to this pulse, as it literally pulses through our own body, is to the degree that we can move beyond the old static energy that holds us back, and that most people want to remain. They want to stay stuck in these old static ways of being that clearly are not in alignment with the natural planet or a universal law. They're just not. They're totally don't fit. And a lot of people are like, oh no, we want it to stay. So that's all happening. And many of us are like, no, we don't want to go back to the way it was. We want to go into something that is harmonically in alignment with the physical and non-physical aspects of reality, of this universe, of what is. And we want these beings that we are to live in harmony with that. So with that in mind, if it seems like that's what's happening, wouldn't you say that we're kind of living in like the greatest quantum experiment there ever was? Because you've got so many people focused, most of the population are focused in a very narrow parameter of what they think is happening. But then there's a smaller group that are like, wait a minute, their focus is way bigger. And they're like, that little narrow focus, that's not what's happening at all. This is what's happening. We can't describe it. We can't really put words on it, but that's what's happening. And so now it's kind of just like, almost like a tug and pull, I guess you could say, of like, there's those of us who are observing this greater force that is unification, that is everything, become embodied within us at an individual level. Would you say that that is happening? We're starting to realize that this unification that everybody talks about is an individual process that we have to take responsibility for cultivating within until it starts to become self-evident.
Exactly.
And then you just see through all of the projections and the triggers and the things that people think, and you're like, okay. So essentially what I'm saying is, would you agree that at some point we have to take full responsibility for how we perceive the world?
Yes.
And not let any of it go to anybody else? We have to really be the ones that are like, it's not you, it's not them, it's not us against them. It is truly deep down seated inside of me as this soul that I am that is evolving through these times. And I don't know how, but I'm here to own it, and I'm going to do whatever needs to be done in order for that to become manifest. Would you say something?
I mean, you said a few interesting things, but that self-responsibility is really key in engaging in the work, because you not only have to take responsibility for your own stuff, but then your ancestral karma, stuff from past lifetimes even can come up, you know? So it's a lot of responsibility for like everything that happened in this lifetime and every other lifetime. And that's where true empowerment comes, because then you realize that you as a soul, you as a consciousness literally create these experiences that you can learn and grow. And then it becomes exciting. And then it becomes an adventure. And we are at the end of an age right now, you know, we are at the end of the Pisces Virgo axis age, end of the Piscean age, leading into the true age of Aquarius astrologically, which Dane Rudger said was like 2060. But what he said is that there's actually seed people for the new Aquarian age that are here now to kind of like usher us into this new era, you know? So you guys are doing that in your own work. We're doing that in our own work. And we're trying to really, you know, rather than identify with the dying world, we're trying to identify with the new world that we want to be creating, you know, and I think that we've been doing that for a while now.
Yeah, and then the way, in a sense, we're way showers. I mean, not for the ego to hijack it in some sort of self-importance, but, you know, mission activated. We can, you know, that's why we incarnated during this time of transition, as I call it, or the esoteric traditions have called. That's what we're here for. So part of my true self is actually very excited during these times. Like, this is finally it's happening. It's going down, you know. So I'm Aquarius too. So I'm like, yes, finally.
He's been waiting for this.
Waiting for this moment my whole life.
Oh my gosh.
But it is, you know, that's what we sign up for, you know, and that's, I always say these are intense times, but exciting times. So seize the moment. There's a silver lining. There's a huge opportunity, but it's not a guarantee, right? We need to be aware that, you know, as a Hopi Indian said, there's a way up or down. You know, we done many times in ancient history, the divine pressed the reset button, the true great reset, right? To repeat the whole cycle because we didn't learn our lessons. And as an esoteric axiom states, we don't get to move on until we learn our lessons, hence the self-responsibility.
Yes.
And that's easier said than done because it's so much more tempting for the ego, and I'm not taking myself out of the equation, to always fall into a victim and blame somebody else, right, externally. Instead of like, you know, but if you go into the victim blame route, which is also the foundation of the Piscean age, the victim age.
Yes,
you
it's
see
the
this
shadow side of the Pisces age.
You see this in all these woke ideologies, the victim is worshipped, but being stuck in blame and victim is essentially, if you even go through it logically, it's very disempowering, because you give the power away to somebody else who's always oppressing you, instead of like, no, I have the power to rise above this,
Yes.
to really embody myself and create a whole new world. And that's the opportunity we have right now.
And what's fascinating about the whole victim blame thing, and you learn about this in evolutionary astrology, is like and this is where it gets very controversial almost, it's almost every experience where you felt you've been victimized in previous incarnations, it often shows that they've been the perpetrator in the same experience over lifetimes. So we keep playing these roles back and forth. You know, with me, I went through profound, you know, sexual abuse for most of my 20s. And then looking at my evolutionary astrology chart with the South Node in Scorpio, I've been the perpetrator in many ways as well, you know? So it's like the self-responsibility really comes on multidimensional levels, and realizing you have these potentials within you, you know, and you're choosing which potentials to act out. I think that's the key thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, I don't want to say the word rare, but it's, you don't run across this level of honesty, transparency, and integrity every day. People who are saying it like it is. I mean, to me, this is like the most ultimate form of leadership. You're leading by example. You're super inspiring. You're very both so strong, and so cool that you came together, and just, you know, the relationship that you both, you know, have with each other, and just the whole concept of turning adversity into a blessing, to me, is why I made it. I mean, the victim consciousness is unreal, because it's like we're learning boundaries. Yeah, we came in vulnerable. You know, children are vulnerable, but we learn to build the spiritual muscle. We learn what we need to do to protect ourselves, and how to avoid certain situations that might have endangered us. And it's just so interesting to see how many people are, you know, caught. But I love what you just said about, you know, these lessons are going to be repeated on a very large level for those that aren't ready to move to the next phase. And that, to me, is the real split. But then in a way, we still kind of act as spirit guides, not coming from ego, but the love will always be there. There's no physical separation that can take away a soul connection. And that's, you know, people that have contemplated suicide, and these are the people that, yeah, okay, maybe that was a dark place, but to me, I don't like the word depression, or there's something wrong with you because you're depressed, based on the quote that you shared about is no measure of health being well adjusted to a sick society. To me, depression is just an inner calling or a longing that doesn't feel attainable, or there's a lot of reasons for depression, but if we listen to it and give it respect, it guides us. And so I'm kind of rambling here, but so the fact that everybody's been on death's door more than once is obviously, there's not a problem with death. There's a comfort there. It's like, it's kind of like a vacation. Like, please, I just want to go home, because it's really rough down here. And it's so crazy to see people ruled by the opposite, where going home to source or some other dimension besides here is the most threatening thing. And I almost feel like we're spiritual extreme sportists, you know, like willing to jump off a mountain with a parachute, you know, just have this like greater faith in being ourselves, because what is there to lose? Because death is not something to be afraid of. I don't know. That was a bit of a ramble, but you guys know what I mean? Because being on that precipice, being so close to that, and feeling the magnetic pull towards it, you know what a divine place it is, and it's not a place to fear. Do you want to speak on that? And then I know we should probably close. I could keep you here all day, and I want to be respectful of your time. But like, just you're the way you've related to death, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still on a physical, instinctual level scared of death. He can tell you whenever we are driving in the car, the car comes too fast towards us, I'm like, so, and even when I cut my finger with a very sharp knife. I cut a slice of it off, and I was like, you know, I realized my mortality in that moment, especially since I'm very embodied. It was like extremely painful, you know. So I think there's always going to be, the physical body always fears its own annihilation. You know?
But the earth needs you, and you know that too. So it's probably pressure to stay here for everybody.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, I think it's kind of the opposite, you know, with the Pisces age. You have to also ground yourself through these Virgo principles, which is like service, daily routine, structure, like ground yourself in earthly reality, you know. Even every day we have to wake up, take our dog for a walk, and all these things. Like, we have these responsibilities, and that's that's kind of like the chop wood, carry water mentality. You know, when I was very depressed and suicidal, I was hopeless. I didn't have meaning in my life. And I think the more that you can actually infuse your life with meaning and purpose on a daily basis, it doesn't mean you have to go out and be like a light worker who's going to save the world, but just find something that gives your life meaning, whether it's just a little small ritual, like going out in the sun every day, you know, and that grounds you into the earth, because it's so, I mean, even if you do kill yourself, you're going to have to repeat the lesson. So once you realize that it's not worth it, you know, but also just grounding yourself in everyday life, I think is important, rather than thinking, okay, if I just ascend and meditate, I'll just go somewhere else. You're not going to do that, especially since I found out through meditation, you actually become more sensitive to the collective earth energies. So there is no escaping, you know, so it's just about finding something that gives you meaning and grounding that into your everyday life, whether that's being of service in some way, which is awesome, or working on yourself, or just finding something that brings you joy, you know, because I did notice last year, even though there was lots of chaos, there was like an immense amount of like love, like frequencies pouring down. So I was kind of like deviating between like being scared and being like, wow, this is amazing. And like, it was, yeah, that's interesting.
The images I get when you're talking is really the anchoring of heaven on earth, because we're lifting the veil between life and death. So we've been playing around with certain extremes here and there, and we find that 0 point unified field, we find that internal balance in our divine center, and then we're able to straddle kind of both worlds and not be, you know, because I feel like you guys are multidimensionally aware, like that veil is gone. Sorry, you're going to say something though, but you know what I mean? I don't know if you...
No, absolutely. That's what we also like, what the veil is thinning right now, right? We're piercing, like my lab said, through the veil, like everything is coming up more. We are multidimensional beings on all levels. And ultimately our destination in the light of, we haven't finished evolution as human beings, is completely to transcend death, going beyond death and birth. Yes. Right, to fully embody a light body, manifest instantaneously. I mean, this is a state of being we cannot conceptually, even the mind cannot grasp, right? But we haven't finished evolution. Sri Aurobindo, whose teachings I follow of integral yoga, he said, man is a transitional being. We haven't finished our evolution yet, right? We're caught in between states, our lower nature and the higher nature. We're like in the middle earth, so to speak, in the middle world, right? And death right now is a profound teacher. That's the way I see it. You know, I personally, you know, I'm not saying I'm completely fearless. I still have my fears and worries, usually ridiculous stuff my ego attaches to, right? So I have to catch myself and remember myself. But I would find dying tomorrow, I have no regrets. It's fine. You know, I think that's, you know, like as Castaneda said, or Gurdjieff also, you know, we got to live always contemplating or having death on your right shoulder or left shoulder, whatever the analogy goes, you know, to be aware of your mortality. Because I believe, you know, when you understand it in light of the evolution of consciousness and soul evolution, and we incarnate in this lower density 3D, this body, right, that's where we can actually make more progress in light of soul evolution, because of the friction, because of the limitation, because more limitation, more friction, right away,
more material.
It's more material to work with, and you need more, being even more creative, so to speak. So that kind of, you know, that's why there's an opportunity right now with more polarization and friction right now. So, and when I talk about transcending death, ultimately we need to die every day to the past, to our attachments, right? Yes. That's really what I understand. It's not the physical body, but death to our attachments, to the past, which we carry. We all carry this bag, you know, unconsciously. And can you see it manifest in the body? I feel like our body is a walking biography. And if you notice, most of the tension we hold is in the back of the body, right? And that's where all these, you know, we carry our experiences, our unresolved emotions with us, that the manifest intention. So it's about, you know, ultimately it's the great work too, you know, symbolized in the resurrection of Jesus and whatnot, which is basically death of the ego personality and to be reborn in your true self. And that's what we want to achieve, you know, ideally within a lifetime, but maybe we need a few more.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun to talk to you guys. When I come across your stuff, it's just so refreshing. I mean, I know you do this work all the time and you help people one-on-one and directly, but just the energy you generate, you know, through social media and just through the words that you speak that reach so many. I mean, you really, I can feel that you create corrections. Like you bring people back to center, and it's not a dependency thing. It's not the misuse of power. It isn't coming from your ego at all. It's raw and it's authentic, and it's just like, makes me smile and just like, phew, thank God, it's very refreshing. Any thoughts you want to share, Seth? And I know we probably should let them go, but we've really enjoyed talking to you. Seth, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just say, I love this conversation. I love the things that we brought up. And obviously we could go for hours in every direction on all the different things, and maybe we will in the future. But it's true. It all comes down to people are becoming aware that how are we going to master some other world if we can't master this one, right? So everybody's looking to escape or get away, and they're not really looking forward to being who they are and what they are and processing that. But because they think it's work, you know, it's like, it's an effort, but it's like, maybe change the way we look at it, okay? Because death isn't separate from us. It's already a part of us. It's just the fear of it that we project into it that makes it worse than it appears to be. So when we look at these practices that we're doing and our path towards self-mastery as something that we love to do, that it's playful, it's our hobby, it's like we get passionate about it, we get right into it, then suddenly it's not this laborious, like, oh, I gotta create this whole new way of being because the world that I'm addicted to is falling away. It becomes a labor of love. You love doing it. And the more of us really embody that and practice it to the best of our abilities, the more we're just going to naturally emit that out into the field, thus giving others permission, whether they're conscious of it or not, just by our own example. And I feel like that's where we're headed. We're doing it. And there's enough of us doing this now to inspire a whole bunch of others to do that, because it is creativity. We are creative beings. We are in a transition state, like you said, Bernhard, but that is the beauty of it. That's the excitement. That's where like the good stuff is. And I don't want to just hide out and disappear. I already tried to do that. I got ripped out of my world hiding out and thrown right into the belly of the beast, you could say. And that's how I had to learn how to make peace with the devil, you could say. You know, find all the things that I was most afraid of. And I just said, there's something in me that I love greater than how I'm perceiving all of these external threats. And I just kept creating that internal environment, and suddenly those external threats weren't at all what I thought. So I just wanted to say that, because you guys are doing the work. Laura, you're doing it. Like, we're doing the work, and we're getting to this new place, all of us together, that has the potential to inspire a lot more people to do this. And that's what I'm excited to see. Thank you guys for doing this.
Oh yeah, and I'm just, any final words or anything that we didn't ask or share together that is really kind of coming through, just to hold space for that, and then where to find you and what sort of courses you do, and just anything you want to share about that. But I just wanted to say one thing first. It's, we die so many times while still maintaining the physical vessel. And I would love to talk to you more about the Sun-Pluto thing, because that's just so much fun.
We could do a whole podcast on that one.
Oh yeah, we should, because I do astrology and I do readings, and I used to do them all the time. So it would be really fun to.
So you have Pluto on your Sun too? Is it conjunct, or what's the aspect?
Yeah, I got Sun conjunct Pluto in Libra.
Oh shit.
So I'm not an easy person to be a part of. It's like, if we're not going to completely merge up.
I have Sun conjunct Pluto, except it's out of sign. I have Pluto in Scorpio, but I still have Sun in Libra. So
no kidding. Okay, so let's create something. We could create a roundtable with other astrologers, and
both. My favorite topic. He knows. I'm like,
oh, look forward to doing that. And it's so funny when you mentioned the mortality thing, because there was a time when I'd fly on the plane and there'd be turbulence, and I'm like, so what if the plane crashes? And then I got to a certain point where I was like, I'd be grabbing the person next to me, and I'd tarot cards, and I'd be reading the tarot deck. They're like, what is those? What are you doing? I'm like, I'm seeing if the plane's. Anyway, I just had to add that because I can relate. But you know, because there's a greater awareness that comes through all this stuff that we go through, and you guys have been able to navigate with such clarity things that would otherwise kick a person's ass and make them stuck for a really long time. And the fact that you're in service to those people and you're helping them is such a beautiful, you know, thing, and that you're doing it together as this amazing couple. So yeah, anything that we didn't talk about that's wanting to come through that we missed, or that you want to bring forward, and then where can we find you, and anything about your website or the kind of courses, or I know you guys have a podcast too. So just sort of like wherever you want to go with what I just said.
Thank you. Well, nothing to add. Yeah, that was really excellent. We really enjoyed that. You know, you guys asked some great questions. Like Seth said, I mean, between the four of us, we could go in all kinds of direction, talk way more. So I think we touch upon some core issues, some very important topics we need to consider beyond what's going on in the world intellectually understanding,
Yes,
right?
yes.
In terms of the agenda and whatnot. But as cliche as it is, we are the ones we've been waiting for, right? That's what it comes down to. But with regards to where you can find us, well, yeah, Laura and I, we offer online courses. We are right now in the middle of one called Embodied Soul Awakening. That's kind of, we do 10 weeks, right?
We basically were doing retreats in Peru until all of this happened. So then we had to figure out a way to take our retreats online. So now we basically do these 10-week self-work programs where we guide people through this process of holistic self-work using all the tools that we use on ourselves to stay sane and grounded during these times. Right now, we don't have, we're already running a group, but later this year, if you sign up to his mailing list, at veilofreality.com. We're going to be doing it as a self-paced program, and there's also going to be other opportunities where we're coaching people through that. You can find me on Instagram, basically, because I'm in Facebook jail for 23 more days. So
yeah, and we have a podcast as well, Cosmic Matrix Podcast.
Yes.
Just Laura and myself, and sometimes we have guests on, and you know, on some point we should get you guys on. You know,
yes,
that would be awesome. And you can also find it at veilofreality.com as well. And yeah, sign up to the mailing list on my website to
our
stay
Telegram
informed.
too.
We have a Telegram group as well, Time of Transition.
Yes.
Because like, yeah, if you know, I've been on Facebook periodically in Facebook,
Facebook
30 days here and there, and then she's in 30 days again. So it's hard to like, I cannot even spell. I have to misspell purposely all this stuff not to get caught. But they still get to you, you know, so
we share a lot more. So that's t.me/time of transition. But if you know how to use Telegram, you can just search time of transition and it should show up.
And and that's that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Oh, sweet. Well, it's been wonderful to hang with you guys. I look forward to more to come, and we'll be in touch. And everybody just check the description, find out more. The links are there. And any final words, Seth? And man, I knew I would just, you know, I kind of walk around in a funk. It takes me till about noon to kind of like deal with being in the human realm. And, but I knew, like, even though I was like, oh, I'm not at my best, but when I felt into the vibration, I was like, man, I'm going to feel so shifted and so much better after talking to you guys, and even more so than I could have even imagined. So I've really enjoyed this, and thank you again. And Seth, any final words?
Just thank you, yeah, for showing up, for being who you are, for incarnating during this time, and just being consistent with all that you do. You know, that is, it's like Laura said, it's so exemplary of the type of leadership that the whole world could truly benefit from, instead of this idea of what people think leaders are supposed to do. Because the leaders that we see are running corporations, destroying the planet, they're doing all, like, that's leadership? No. Yeah. Leadership is loving your life, loving that you're having this temporary moment being a human, being human. And the more we attune ourselves and place priority on that, the more we just start to synchronize with what is actually going on instead of what appears to be. And thank you for being part of this experiment with us.
Thank you, guys. It was awesome.
Awesome. Okay, well, have a great rest of your evening. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and much love. And gosh, there's so much to be excited about. We are treasures waiting to be opened, and our junk DNA is the treasure. I mean, anything that is adversity, remember, a blessing is on the other side of it. Thanks for reminding us, you guys. Okay, take care.